I couldn't believe it, the reaction of people when I stepped out of that stadium. There was people crying and hugging me and shaking my hand.
We've won a lot of titles with the Sevens team over the years, but the Commonwealth Games sits right at the top.
Standing on dice and hearing that anthem and seeing a flag in your own country, yeah, it's a big buzz.
It makes every hair on your head stand up and it makes you go weak in the knees.
And I think it's just something beyond measurable to see your own flag fly.
Well, the Commonwealth Games, just wonderful.
We've got to join together, let our laughter fill the air. It's time for every race and creed to throw away their every care. Let's forge unite us all as one in the spirit of the Lord above. And let us all remember the games are for the fostering of peace and love.
As head of the Commonwealth, I regard today as a highlight in our calendar.
The Empire Games, a celebration of sports excellence in the Commonwealth. Humanity, destiny, equality, the friendly games.
One of the most striking features of the Commonwealth Games is the friendships made among people who would otherwise never have met.
The Empire and Commonwealth Games are a core part of New Zealand's sporting heritage.
You have trained and practiced for many months and for long hours, and you have earned the right to be here.
Kiwis have been there all the way, since the first Empire Games in Hamilton, Canada in 1930, a year before New Zealand joined the Commonwealth under the Statute of Westminster.
I trust that all of you will enjoy to the full this special Commonwealth occasion.
We've hosted 3 Commonwealth Games. We've touched, and we've been touched by this great sporting event.
We embrace the Games because we win more medals, and we'd like to win. If our rugby or cricket or netball are winning, we like it. And we don't win so many medals at the Olympics. At the Com Games, we do.
Very friendly games, and you get to know all the other competitors, and you're just like one big happy family.
Simcic, swim quick, and she did.
I think it's what, the silver fern and, the New Zealand flag and everything, it embodies it all. It's just amazing. You walk in and there's just this amazing sense of camaraderie and goodwill, and you just want everyone in black and white to do well and succeed and reach their dreams.
You go to a normal weightlifting competition, all there are weightlifters. But you go to the Commonwealth Games, you've got athletes, swimmers, rugby players. I mean, how many people can go along and sit next to Jonah and have breakfast?
We've all grown up watching it. Dick Taylor winning his 10,000 metre gold medal and the jumping around afterwards. And, seeing them get their medals and get their the national anthem played, was a huge chance for us to do the same thing.
Some people probably laugh to think that I pulled on my athletic singlet, and I actually wore my shorts too and tucked myself into bed because I was so proud of being a Kiwi, and the next day or tomorrow I was going to be running in that singlet and shorts, and to me it was quite special.
New Zealand's first Commonwealth Games star was Bill Saverdon, who won gold in the 6 mile in 1930. He wore the black singlet with the silver fern, but we were still under monarchy rule, and just 6 sports, track and field, boxing, lawn bowls, rowing, swimming and diving, and wrestling, had Empire Games status. 1934, still 6 sports. A team of just 5 New Zealand athletes. Our only champion, the elusive great miler, Jack Lovelock. These were games originally set for Johannesburg, but held in England to prevent political crisis. The Empire concerned about the way South Africa might greet and treat the black and Asian athletes. Being on the other side of the globe, the first 2 games were difficult for New Zealand to embrace. 1938 changed that. Held in the Southern Hemisphere for the first time, the opening ceremony of the 3rd Empire Games was at the Sydney Cricket Ground. 15 nations, 7 sports, 25 New Zealand medals. Kiwis had tasted the Empire Games firsthand for the first time, and they liked it. World War II put the Games on ice, and it wasn't until 1950 that the 4th Empire Games was held.
A Maori welcome is a New Zealand welcome. and it's a greeting to all.
If New Zealanders had been enthralled by 1938 in Sydney, they were to be captivated by 1950 in Auckland.
I was a secondary school boy, went into Eden Park and went to the cycling and went to just whatever I could go and see. And I was astounded by it. I was just totally thrilled to be there.
As a 16-year-old, I stood in a very different Eden Park to what it is today. It's remarkable to think how much it has evolved in those 55 years now. But I must say that I was inspired. There was an athlete, Harold Nelson, who ran in the 6 miles and won. And at that moment I thought, gosh, that's wonderful. What an inspiration,
40,000 spectators were at Eden Park for the opening ceremony, and over the Games 250,000 watched nearly 600 athletes from 12 countries join together.
Today, 1950, Auckland City stands ready to welcome athletes to the British Empire Games, for which New Zealand is a proud host.
In 1950 New Zealand, wool was booming and the Legislative Council was abolished. On the water in 1950, we won. In the boxing and wrestling rings, we won. In the pool, on the greens, and in the weight room, we won. But it was Yvette Williams at Eden Park that a generation of New Zealanders remember.
19 feet 4 5/8 inches, a Games record by an outstanding athlete.
It's my first international competition and I really didn't know what to expect. The crowd, of course, were very supportive of any New Zealander that was competing there, and it was, I think, every day it was just a full. Eden Park was absolutely chock-a-block full, so it was good atmosphere.
While our women had started working in wartime, in 1950 most wives still stayed at home. As international athletes, women were far from equal.
The longest distance that women would run was 220 yards. Even at the Olympics, 400 metres was the longest distance that was run in 52. But I think we've proved otherwise since then.
So when 20-year-old Yvette Williams jumped for the stars at Eden Park, she not only won gold, but the hearts of a nation.
Yvette Williams of New Zealand, covering 19 feet 2 1/4 inches in her first leap, beats the Games record by 2 inches.
Well, it's always a great thrill to stand on the dais, on the top of the dais, and see the flag going up for New Zealand and your national anthem being played, so that's always something you remember forever.
Yvette Williams led the way for New Zealand in 1950. Our biggest Empire Games team so far had fetched 11 gold medals, and Kiwis the length of the long white cloud had, for the first time, taken ownership of the friendly games.
May I now request that the flag of the British Empire Games Federation be lowered.
Then bring up is Olympic and world champion Yvette Williams.
Vancouver 1954, where 1950 Golden Girl Yvette Williams led the way again.
The slow motion camera gives a chance to study more closely the powerful rhythmic movements of a world champion in action.
3 gold medals this time, and one of 3 Otago athletes, along with swimmers Jean Stewart and Lincoln Hurring, who shone for New Zealand in Vancouver, where a young Ekatahuna-born Aucklander called Murray Hellberg ran in his first British Empire and Commonwealth Games.
I had my mates with me, my Bill Baileys and so on, and Yvette Williams leading the way was a great inspiration to us all. But of course, being young fellas from first basically international competition, we were sadly outclassed.
Hellberg had watched in the stands in 1950, and he'd been outshone in 54.
The centre of the North Island's volcanic plateau.
By 1958, though, while Wairaki generated geothermal electricity for the first time, and the New Zealand government introduced PAYE tax, Murray Hellberg led New Zealand to Cardiff and made the Empire and Commonwealth Games 3 mile his own.
By that time I'd been working very strongly with Arthur Lydiard, my coach, and he said to me, with 3 laps to go, throw down the challenge, sprint for a lap. You're the coach. So that's what we did. To go through that race and employ those tactics meant that there was nothing held back in reserve.
Hellberg spearheaded a mighty New Zealand track and field campaign, and the medals came for some of the great athletics names, despite a catastrophic journey to Cardiff.
The plane broke down everywhere. Everyone just about got sick from a forced stopover in Calcutta and then Karachi. People were on oxygen in the plane. We arrived at midnight in London. We had a 5-hour trip to Cardiff. There were in buses. People were doing all sorts of disgusting things in the bus because they were totally ill. I think we had, when we arrived in Cardiff, 35 people out of 90 were taken straight to hospital.
Val Young was struck by illness in Cardiff, but she won the first of her 5 gold medals. 5 golds that make her New Zealand's most successful Commonwealth champion.
Pretty special, especially the first one, and I guess it's a sense of relief that you've finished. I think a lot of, well, certainly for me, it was a relief to know that I had won. But yeah, it's great. Go on that and have your flag run up, and Sir Arthur Porritt gave me my medal, and yeah, it was pretty special.
By Cardiff, there were 35 nations at the Games, over 1,000 athletes and 9 sports. Going into the 1960s, the Empire and Commonwealth Games were here to stay. And New Zealand was about to truly emerge as one of the Commonwealth's great track and field nations.
I declare the 7th British Empire and Commonwealth Games open.
It was the year of the Heat and Dust Games. 35 countries, including newcomers British Honduras, Dominica, Papua New Guinea and St. Lucia. Over 1,000 athletes.
Here at the Athletic Stadium, a capacity crowd of 50,000 people gathered to watch the official opening of the 7th Commonwealth Games.
Perth, 1962. The year the Cook Strait Rail ferry service begins. The year a New Zealand runner named Peter Snell establishes mile and half-mile world records and wins Commonwealth gold. Twice.
Another gold medal to New Zealand.
But it wasn't just Snell. This was when New Zealand ruled the middle distance world. And at the Perth Commonwealth Games, our men and women in black ruled the track. 11 track and field medals, 5 of them gold, the 2 to Snell, 2 to Val Young, and the 3-mile again belonged to
30
Hellberg.
yards from the finishing line, he put in his final sizzling burst and sprinted away from Australia's Ron Clark and the Canada Kid. A tactical triumph for Murray Hellberg. Hellberg's time, 13 minutes 34.2 seconds.
In between those Commonwealth Games was the Olympics, of course, where I did employ the same tactics. But by Perth in 62, there was a young Canadian athlete, Bruce Kidd, who, and a couple of British runners, Bruce Tuller being one of them, who said that I'd passed my best. I had lost a bit of speed and a bit of pace. And I thought, hello, I want to prove in this race that whatever I did, I would win. Sure, I could employ the same tactics, and I know that I'd win this. But I want to beat these fellows this time in a different way. Yeah, I used a different tactic altogether.
2 of his keenest admirers and supporters, his wife and daughter Greta.
Outside the main stadium in 62, our flag was raised 5 more times. Rowing gold.
7 seconds, and New Zealand's first rowing gold medal.
Fencing gold for Melody Coleman. Gold in the boxing ring, and once again in lawn bowls. Bowls establishing itself as one of New Zealand's strongest game sports. In Perth, it was men's doubles gold to Robbie Robson and Bob McDonald. One of the 10 golds won for New Zealand in the Heat and Dust.
Athletes from all corners of the widespread Commonwealth intermingled to signify the spirit of unity of sport and of international friendship.
If it was hot in Perth, it was oppressive in Jamaica 4 years later. The last Commonwealth Games of the 60s and the rising of a New Zealand track and field star who knew plenty about oppression. Kingston was Roy Williams' last shot at Games glory, after a decade of being snubbed by selectors.
From a sporting perspective, the most important thing in my life, because it proved to anybody who's prepared to listen that I was up to international standard after 3 major disappointments, having missed out on the 1956, 1960 and 1964 Olympic Games.
He would have been probably top 10 in the decathlon in Tokyo, and it was ridiculous that he didn't. But that was a huge reward for him, and I'm sure it's been the high point of his athletic career.
Williams was also an award-winning journalist, and he campaigned for the decathlon to be included in Jamaica.
Maybe an ulterior and selfish motive, but at the same time, the decathlon had been on the Olympic program since for the previous maybe 50 years, and also in the European Championships, and I figured it was good enough to have it on the Olympics, it was good enough to have it in the Commonwealth Games.
And the rest, as they say, is history. His gold in hellish conditions earning him the Sportsman of the Year award and the applause of a nation.
Well, very popular in the news media, latched onto it as well. Maybe because I was working for the news media at the time, I don't know, but there was a lot of sympathy because of what I'd gone through in 1964. And a lot of people felt that, well, you know, I was 32 or 33 years of age, and the fact that I was hung in there for maybe 10 or 12 years. And I think it was a major motivating factor for me being awarded the New Zealand Sportsman of the Year.
Les Mills also won gold and silver in Kingston.
Kingston was... it was unusual. It was a different environment to New Zealand. In a way, it was quite a tough environment. You had to just be a little bit careful there. But the competition was great.
And in Jamaica, Val Young again won double gold.
Oh, the lovely country. All the beautiful water and just the vibrancy of the country and the people, and the buses with local people, you know, carrying dinners and chickens, and it was just marvellous. It was just beautiful. And rum, I can remember rum.
11 track and field medals for New Zealand in '66. Swimming gold for Dave Gerard, boxing gold for Bill Kinney, and weightlifting gold for Don Oliver. Excellence from New Zealand athletes. But conditions in Jamaica, anything but excellent.
The hottest month in Jamaica in the previous 50 years, and the humidity is about 90%.
Jamaica was very, very hot. Bob Marley was alive and well down the bottom of the road of the village where we were in Kingston.
Took the shelves out of the refrigerator and sat there for about an hour to cool off. Yeah, I didn't shut the door though.
Bob Marley did live at the bottom of the road, and it was fantastic. It was just another world over there. No security. You could go anywhere, any place, and do anything.
Still, as the 60s ran into the 70s, New Zealand's success at the friendly games continued to grow, and so did the games. In 1970, while New Zealanders protest the Vietnam War and Brian Williams scores tries in South Africa, the Commonwealth Games returned to the motherland. The first metric games with electronic photo finish technology. The first games attended by the Queen in her capacity as head of the Commonwealth. In 1970, the games had ballooned. 42 countries, nearly 1,800 athletes and officials, 10 sports. But for New Zealanders, this is how Edinburgh is remembered most.
And number 493 is Sylvia Potts for New Zealand. Into the finishing straight. Joan Page really kicking for home. Rita Ridley's towering, but trying again, and Sylvia Potts coming on the near side. 50 metres left, and Ridley coming through the middle. Sylvia Potts is towering. What a finish this is. It's Potts of New Zealand and Ridley of England. And, oh, she died. Ridley, Page, and the little Canadian girl, Thelma Fenn. And that must be the unluckiest story in the whole history of athletics.
In 1970, Roy Williams was at the Games, injured and working instead as a journalist.
And that was one stride too many.
She actually went over there mainly to run the 800 metres, and the 1500 metres was a secondary event, and she wasn't expected to do any good at all, but coming into the straight, she was leading, and then, of course, leading right down the straight, and still leading 10 metres from the finish, and 5 metres she got the staggers, and she just collapsed about 1 metre from the line, and just a gold medal she went from first to sixth or something in the space of a couple of metres, and such a tragedy because she is such a lovely lady. But afterwards I interviewed her and she said, well, I said, you're really totally distraught and so on. She said, not really. She said, because I know I gave it my best shot.
Barbara Paulson's shot put silver was one of just 4 track and field medals for New Zealand in 1970. Les Mills again collected twice, and Dick Quacks claimed silver in the game's most remarkable race.
2 yards clear of Quacks of New Zealand. And Kano kicking again, and Quacks trying to respond, but shortening slightly and looking to see where the rest are. He could have conceded the goal with that movement. And it's Kano coming away again. The Kenyan striding down the straight to win the gold medal once more. Magnificent front running by Kano. He's tired, but he wins the title for Kenya. Quacks is second.
With no track and field gold, 1970 was cycling's games. Harry Kent and Bruce Biddle winning New Zealand's only gold medals. Harry Kent returned home to Trentham to a hero's welcome and the Sportsman of the Year award. New Zealand cycling had won its first gold in Commonwealth Games history.
Harry Kent.
And while Bruce Cameron was a New Zealand Games selector for nearly 3 decades, he will never forget 1970 in Edinburgh. His bronze, his first Games medal.
The games where you win your first medal is always an exciting occasion, and it could be in the worst possible place in the world, but for you it'd be the most wonderful place in the world. So my 1970 experience in Edinburgh is just wonderful.
Bruce Cameron also won bronze 4 years later, in the games all New Zealand will always remember.
Listen for the roar for New Zealand.
New Zealand!
1974, the 10th Commonwealth Games in Christchurch, New Zealand.
And now it gives me the very greatest pleasure to declare the 10th British Commonwealth Games open.
74 games were great games here in New Zealand. It's still talked about by people who were there as the friendliest games ever.
It was quite unique, the build-up and the transition of coloured TV and sport in colour. And of course it was all built around the Commonwealth Games, so people were buying up the coloured TVs, or they didn't have one, they were going to someone's place.
I'd never seen an African athlete with the braided hair and they were black as black, and it was a culture shock to me, yeah. And just seeing the physiques on some of them, they're like chiselled stone, just unbelievable.
Going into the Christchurch Games, Helen Reddy was playing on the radio, and controversially, daylight saving had been introduced. There had also been debate leading friendly games.
There were a few problems, Mayor Powering, the town hall, the Christchurch International Airport, and some of the ratepayers weren't happy at that. And as they started to count down to the games, ticket sales weren't great.
I think when a games comes to a city or some big event, there's always controversy over what should be done or what shouldn't be done, but Kiwi 2 stood the test of time. It's pretty good.
Any dissent, though, was to dissolve at the new disputed Kiwi 2 Park on day one of the 10th British Commonwealth Games.
100 to run for Taylor. He has to look. He's got a run. He's racing away. He's got time to look around. This is a great victory, a great upset, a great champion. Dick Taylor of New Zealand.
Garth Lydiard and Alistair McMurran, who was looking after me sort of in Eden and working with Arthur, but Arthur never mentioned medals. He spoke about getting in the games team, and then as we counted down, he told me I'd run my best ever time by 3/4 of a minute. People close to track and field knew. Lydiard had obviously spoken to a lot of people. Some of the journos knew that Peter Snell knew, and people like Roy Williams probably knew that things were looking good for me, and he just told me to get out and run those lap times and let the race unfold. And of course I was aware of the field and could hear noise. Obviously there was a bit of pushing and shoving. And then I settled down to my pace, and I was sort of minding my own business, not until probably halfway mark that I looked up and realised that how far the main bunch was ahead of me. And to this day I don't know why I never panicked. It was almost as though I'd lassoed them and then started to pull the rope in. Each lap I just slowly worked on until I was getting closer to the bunch, and I always remember the crowd were chanting black.
The crowd are cheering black, and I guess that goes for every one of them but Bedford at the moment. 4 to go.
I thought, my God, what are they doing? The guy in front of me is black, and the guy in front of him's name's black. Get that sorted out. But then they went back to chanting Taylor. But I mean, that was glorious, being a Kiwi, wearing the silver fern, and knowing the majority of the crowd in that stadium that day, not a huge crowd, were on my side. And then I got on the bunch, and then the pace slowed up quite dramatically, really slowed up. And, I just bided my time. 3 to go, 2 to go, and then the bell. I could hardly hear it. The crowd were making so much noise. And then so just tapered off around the top bend, and 300-metre mark was almost as though Arthur was sitting on my shoulder, sitting there waiting, and he said, let's go. So I dug in down the back straight and come around the top bend and sort of glanced inside, and then I straightened up and headed for home. And, all of a sudden I knew the finishing line was looming up. There was no finishing tape those days, and with sheer excitement I just threw my arms in the air, and someone said, why did you throw your arms in the air? I said, someone in the crowd yelled out the bar's open, and that was just my moment and my day in the sun.
Overnight, Dick Taylor became a Kiwi icon. His race broadcast to the nation and the world, live and in colour.
I remember my sister-in-law asked how I'd get on at the games, and I said, well, Arthur said I'd run my best. But she said, you're going to get a medal? I said, Arthur hasn't said so. She gave up her seat and went shopping in Ballantyne's. So during the event, she must have asked for some service at Ballantyne's and was getting totally ignored because all the staff were watching on a coloured TV the 10,000 metres. And one of the ladies said to her, I think the Kiwi may get a medal here. And she asked who it was. And they said, Dick Taylor. So she said, well, he didn't tell me this was going to happen. Well, I didn't know. But the contrast of, the country stopped, people stopped doing all sorts of things.
24 hours earlier, Arthur Lydiard had forbidden Taylor to attend the opening ceremony.
He never questioned Arthur Lydiard, but I asked why. And he said, I just don't want you to. He said, I want you ready tomorrow. So I had one more shot. I said, Arthur, it's compulsory. He said, that's fine. Check on the bus and go to the toilet and don't come back.
In '74, Dick Taylor was the only male athlete of European ancestry to win a flat track event. The Africans had arrived, and one led the way in perhaps the greatest 1,500-metre race ever run. Both Bailly and Walker broke the world record. Rod Dixon broke his personal best by 3.6 seconds. Walker claimed bronze in the 800 at Christchurch too, in what was a massive track and field games for New Zealand. Gold for athletics wild man Robin Tate.
It was the gold medal and a new Commonwealth Games record.
And yet another Games medal, this time silver for Val Young.
A truly great New Zealand competitor and winner of 5 gold medals.
It was also a family games on the track. From the Menes
if you hang that bottle of beer at the end of 1,500, it breaks 3 minutes.
to the Mills.
We had 4 of us trying to get in. It was the end of my career and I didn't make it. Colleen, my wife, made it in the 400, and Donna, our daughter, made it in the high jump, and Philip, our son, made it in the hurdles. So from a family point of view, it was good. From my personal perspective, it was a wonderful games for New Zealand.
There were so many game stars in Christchurch. Golden girl Jane Parkhouse. Weightlifting gold for Tony Ebert and super heavyweight Graham May. May's games fall infamous.
It was exciting when Graham crashed to the ground on his second clean and jerk, and the old bar twaddled across the stadium and ended up in Princess Anne's lap virtually. And apparently they paid that script in ABC for about 15 years. It was on their intro to all the ABC sports in America.
There was also shooting gold, wrestling gold, and once again, gold on the green.
Lead Kerry Clark, who's 24 and the youngest player in the tournament, generally gave New Zealand a good start.
To win a medal at those events, you felt like an absolute hero, and it's something in my sporting lifetime I will never forget.
So many New Zealand heroes, so many New Zealand experiences.
I loved it. Just the atmosphere, the crowds that was at the games, and one side was all African athletes, and just to shove it up them when I beat this Ugandan, it was side of me. But the experience, it's hard to go back on it, you know, like being so young and experiencing the national anthem being played, and you know, it was quite moving actually. It was a great experience.
So when the curtain finally fell on the 10th Commonwealth Games, the world regarded Christchurch as the little city that could, and did. There may have been venues like the Town Hall and the Woolston Working Men's Club, but Christchurch was deemed by one and all to have been the best Commonwealth Games yet. While the nation had celebrated, the 1974 Christchurch Games had ignited a dream for a 12-year-old New Zealand girl, swimming this time for Fiji.
My father had got a job over there, and we went over there for 6 years, and that was in 1967, and that's actually where I started swimming competitively. And the Commonwealth Games came up, and they were in Christchurch, so it was quite close to Fiji, so they decided to send some swimmers.
Parkhouse all the way. The Jeremy close. I think she's done it.
A young Rebecca Perrott had watched as Janie Parkhouse won gold.
What a hero!
I mean, I remember the race because the two Australians were so busy looking at each other that they didn't see Janie sort of sneaking up on the outside. And being a Kiwi, I mean, I was, you know, obviously very excited with any New Zealander that won a gold medal.
4 years on, Rebecca Perrott was to become New Zealand's last Games golden girl of the 70s.
That's how it looks from the city of Edmonton, from a helicopter above this magnificent new stadium.
Edmonton, 1978. The 11th Commonwealth Games come a year after New Zealand signs the Glen Eagles Agreement. And alongside Gary Hurring,
Gold medal to Gary Hurring of New Zealand.
17-year-old Rebecca Perrott wins medal,
Here comes the challenge from Perrott. 10 metres to go. She's caught Becky Smith. She may not get the English gold, but a medal certainly for Rebecca Perrott as they go into the wall.
after medal,
So it has a second medal in one day for Rebecca Perrott. But
after medal.
Rebecca Perrott coming into the wall. She hits the wall. Let's wait for the time. Just outside the world record, but she's got the gold medal.
You hit the wall, you turn around, and I was gobsmacked actually, because I think it was more the time. I mean, I did my best time by 2 or 3 seconds, so it's an incredible feeling. I mean, and then it sort of, you're so excited, and then all of a sudden the tiredness hits you, and I sort of, you know, you just sort of collapse and take a, you know, puff away sort of thing. It's an incredible feeling to know that you're number one sort of thing.
What an astonishing performance from Rebecca Perrott as the New Zealanders in the crowd applaud this marvellously gifted and talented swimmer from Wellington.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the victory song of the spring.
They cocked that up.
I apologise. The victory song of New Zealand.
So that sort of took the edge off it a little bit, but it's still, it's amazing to hear the anthem and see the flag being raised. I mean, that's incredible.
There were other threads hanging Edmonton to Christchurch. 4 years on from Christchurch, Rod Dixon was denied the chance to challenge Henry Rono for the 5,000 metres gold.
The athletes, you can see, are just jogging about behind the mark because they're waiting for the New Zealander Rod Dixon to appear on the track. But it seems as though, and we can only guess here, that his gear bag has been stolen.
Dixon's gear bag and his race shoes.
A weird thing happened in that in the search for the shoes, we found the shoebox, and of course in the old shoebox someone had left 3 old silver ferns, and that created a mystery that to this day I've never worked out.
That's Dixon. He's just come onto the stadium floor. He'll be in no shape, I'm sure, to run this race.
However, Rod he's a very excitable fellow, and he's a great athlete. He was getting very excited by not having shoes to wear, so we put an announcement over the public address system, and in the end he wore my son Philip's shoes, who was competing in the hurdles.
And that must have been a very harrowing experience indeed.
Dixon had finished a heartbreaking 8th.
I'd run the race before I was even out there, and then of course I ran out, I couldn't stretch out, I couldn't warm up, I started the race and it didn't feel too bad, but as soon as I started to apply pressure I knew that it wasn't there.
And 4 years earlier in Christchurch, this man had won gold for England. In Edmonton, he did it for New Zealand.
Precious McKenzie said all along that he was going to make it 4. That smile tells it all.
This is our day. We are going to defeat this racist.
The 80s started tumultuously for Sporting New Zealand. So by 1982, the year we signed the CER agreement, our elite athletes too were destined for closer relations with Australia, Brisbane in particular.
Commonwealth Games song at the moment being sung.
Matilda, the 13-metre mechanical kangaroo, helped jumpstart Brisbane, which remains one of the best games in Commonwealth history. For New Zealand, Craig Adair won cycling's 3rd Commonwealth gold, John Woolley won shooting gold, and this man won the javelin.
Mike O'Rourke representing New Zealand.
Those Kiwi blokes aside though, Brisbane was the girls' games. Anne Ordain.
So this gutsy 26-year-old New Zealander is out in the lead. And she's slashed the Commonwealth Games record.
Lorraine Moller.
And Lorraine Moller's going to get 3rd.
And a little-known wheelchair-bound archer from Christchurch called Neroli Fairhall.
Well, I remember I woke up the first morning with a splitting headache and could barely lift my head off the pillow. There was a bit in the newspaper the next day, I think, about how I'd had to stop taking all the medication that I'd been taking because it was all banned, and that's why I wasn't well. Reporters and things were probably waiting to pounce, really. Being the first person in a wheelchair to be at a Commonwealth Games.
Brisbane is the only Commonwealth Games to include archery, an anomaly that gave New Zealand one of its true golden girls.
Gusty conditions were the order of the day at the range, and Janet Yates held a 5-point lead going into the final shoot-off, and both competitors had 3 arrows. They had to make them work.
Once the arrows had been pulled and the tournament was finished, somebody said, "I think you've done it." And I said, "Done what?" Shot 3 10s.
Neroli Fairhall, with 3 10-pointers, got the maximum score and got the advantage and the goal.
Well, I sort of turned around and there was all these New Zealanders standing behind the fence that I didn't know they were there. I think they've probably been there most of the afternoon. They're all talking over the fence at me, and I'm sort of sitting, I think I was just a blur, really.
The winner of the gold medal for the ladies double feater round is Neroli Fairhall, representing New Zealand.
They wanted to lift me onto the winner's dais in the middle, and I said, "But do you know if I fit?" And I thought I'd hate to be lifted in the air and suddenly find that I fell off the edge or something. So I sat on the ground.
That day, sitting on the ground in 1982, Neroli Fairhall's day in the sun.
We declare that we will take part in the Commonwealth Games of 1986 in the spirit of true sportsmanship.
1986 too belonged to a New Zealand golden girl. While Ordain and Moller were back in the medals at the 2nd Edinburgh Games, while a young cyclist called Gary Anderson made his mark.
Gary Anderson of Wanganui. Great ride.
And while Anthony Moss and teenager Sylvia Hume ruled the pool.
Gold medal for Sylvia Hume of New Zealand.
And Jimmy Pio boxed his heart out.
Oh, and he's got it.
While New Zealand celebrated all of that, Stephanie Foster was making history.
Stephanie Foster, a gold medal for New Zealand.
Foster won double gold, claiming the single sculls and the double with Robin Clark.
Lengths ahead of the field. What tremendous feeling that must be.
I have more the memory of the double finish than the single, but the single was quite neat because I think that was our first gold medal in the rowing, and it was quite a big win, and the crowd was wonderful. It was really neat, and to actually be given the gold medal was quite lovely, and to hear that national anthem.
But it was carrying the flag and becoming the first New Zealand woman to do so that Foster remembers most.
I have to tell you what it's like. You're standing out the back waiting and waiting because New Zealand's so far down the list and everybody's getting ready and going out before you, and there's just team upon team of these masses of colours, and you hear this horrendous roar come up as each team enters into the arena, and you're sitting out there, and then all of a sudden it comes your turn and you're following the heels of a person in front of you, and you've got the flag in front of you there too, and you're coming down the entranceway into the stadium, and the sound and the feeling it's electric. It makes every hair on your head stand up, and it makes you go weak in the knees, and it makes you grow so tall, and you can see every single face. In the crowd in '86, my mother was up there, and I could see her a mile off, waving a New Zealand tea-towel flag.
New Zealand's other double gold medalist in 1986 was a largely unknown shooter called Greg Yelovich.
I still get goosebumps when people ask me. It is. I mean, you know, we were in a gymnasium, and you had to kind of like walk from one end to the other to get your medal, and you know, I guess other than the Australians, everyone else in the Commonwealth was screaming for you, you know. So it's just like, it was. I mean, I still get goosebumps. And Prince Edward, he gave me my medal.
His golds in Edinburgh, the first 2 of the 10 medals he's won at the Commonwealth Games, the most medals won by any New Zealander.
There at home, I have, I just have a shooting room, and they just actually just sit in the cupboard in there, all nicely rolled up. And that. I mean, I've lost 1 or 2 when I've taken them around, and people. I mean, my doctor once he wanted to see them, so I, took a bag full and gave them to him. And then a couple of months later, someone else wanted to say, "Oh, I thought there's one missing." And so I rang him up. He said, "Oh, I don't know." Next day, yeah, it's fallen in the couch.
Stephanie Foster also carried the flag as Edinburgh ended, bringing to a close the last Commonwealth Games of the 1980s, and bringing to fever pitch New Zealand's anticipation, because 1990 was to belong to Auckland. The 74 games in Christchurch had cost a little over $3 million, and the games had made a profit. The 1990 Auckland Games would have cost over $100 million. So when the opening ceremony arrived, after a lead-in fraught with financial worry and indecision, Auckland and New Zealand breathed a collective sigh, as 300 million people around the world were held in thrall by yet another friendly games.
From a personal point of view, it was special for Colleen and myself because we looked after the Games Village, and as the so-called mayor and mayoress of the Games Village, and that put us in touch with all of the athletes and put us into the dining rooms and the training tracks, and it was like a privilege to do that.
Okay, see ya guys!
There were over 20,000 volunteers at the 14th Commonwealth Games and a record 54 nations.
And that was huge. The fact that we had all the teams adopted by communities around the North Island was wonderful. So they were extra special.
A home games meant a record number of New Zealand athletes, and it meant gold galore. From bolters like Tanya Murray, and Nikki Jenkins.
The winner of the gold medal for the women's vault event is Nikki Jenkins, representing New Zealand.
To the girl most remembered as 1990's Golden Kiwi, Anna Simcic.
The pressure was pretty enormous. I had my own, really high expectations on my own performance, but leading up to it was pretty bizarre. People going, "Oh, this golden girl," and I'm like, me? I haven't even gone to a games before, and I was just this, young, naive 18-year-old really going into it.
Simcic's first swim in Auckland produced silver, not gold.
Simcic will be disappointed. She swam a brave race, but that Livingston, she is tough.
And I remember getting knocked down by the media, and they labelled it silver sadness afterwards. And I was absolutely devastated. And by the time I came back 2 days later for the 200, I was a different person, really. I was like, right, I'm doing this for me. I'm focused. I'm not getting carried away with all these external pressures. This is me. And I swam a by far greater race within myself.
Simcic holding on, 10 metres Simcic swim quick, and she did.
I was just absolutely steely, ice cold, focused on me and exactly how I was going to swim it. And I can still hear people just going, rah, 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 rah. And obviously no noise because your head's in the water, as in no words, but you could just hear this enormous roar. And so I knew it was just down to the last leg, and it was just like neck and neck between myself and Nicole Livingston. And I remember looking up, just going, yes!
But no one can take away this moment from Anna Simcic, and she becomes New Zealand's golden girl of the pool.
And afterwards I loved hearing the stories, like people had TVs at work and were talking about, oh, we watched your race, we were in the middle of a meeting, we had to run and see your race. And that's really cool that you can impact people in that way too. In fact, a friend of mine, one of my best friends, was working at family planning at the time, and they're in the middle of, a man was going in for a vasectomy, and I said, sorry honey, you're gonna have to wait, my friend's racing. So that, this poor bugger's, nervously waiting for his vasectomy. And everyone puts it on hold to come and watch my race. So that's really cool when you can impact people like that. And it was the really nice feel-good factor too.
And while she hadn't won gold this time, New Zealanders also remember the heartbreak that came with silver for bowls Matamata sweetheart Millie Khan. Her 10-week-old grandson had died at the gates as Millie was about to play for gold.
Very brave, Millie Khan. God bless you, Millie.
It was an awful situation to deal with, and there was a whole lot of discussion around, do we tell her, do we not tell her, how do you handle the situation? But it was, and this was consultation with the family. The family said, let's let her get out and play the final.
Of the silver medal for the Women's Singles Commonwealth Games Bowls Championship, Millie Khan, New Zealand.
For New Zealand cycling, 1990 brought unprecedented success. And the star of the show, Gary Anderson.
Gold medal for Gary Anderson. Brilliant run by New Zealand. That's the gold medal. Yes, he's got it. I think he's got it. Yes, he has. Gary Anderson makes it 3 gold medals in New Zealand.
When you're on the other side of the world, you don't see the reaction of the New Zealand people. Whereas the Auckland Commonwealth Games gave us the ability to see their reaction firsthand. And I haven't stood on the dice at a world event and heard the national anthem. The only time for me was the Commonwealth Games. But standing on dice and hearing that anthem and seeing your flag in your own country, it's a big buzz.
Unbelievable for New Zealand cycling.
It was awesome. It was cool. I'm from Wanganui and didn't spend a lot of time in Auckland prior to the 90 Games, and what time I did spend up here I didn't like the place much. It was too busy, too many people, too many cars. But coming up here sort of pre-games for training camps and that sort of thing, I got to like the place a bit more. The flags started appearing everywhere. A lot of the main motorways and the main drags, they had Commonwealth Games signage up and that sort of thing, and it really sort of hyped it up.
Success for our athletes and success for New Zealand at the end of our third home games.
And that final night, it was absolutely fabulous. There was Indians dancing with Kenyans, and there was the English girls dancing with Jamaicans, and I thought if only the world could be like this, there'd be no wars. It's just absolutely fantastic, and that to me epitomised what the Commonwealth Games is all about.
By 1994, while the government sends troops to Bosnia and New Zealand's first casino opens in Christchurch, the Commonwealth Games head to Canada for the 4th time.
The largest parade of countries ever at a Commonwealth Games.
63 nations and nearly 3,500 athletes and officials. 1994 was a quiet Games for New Zealand, just 5 gold medals and 1 reluctant hero.
It's got to be a time stroke. Who's touches first? Let's look. Loader! Loader wins the gold for New Zealand.
1994 also saw the quiet emergence of 2 of New Zealand's future heroes, Sarah Ulmer.
But you've got to hand it to the 18-year-old from New Zealand, Sarah Ulmer. That young lady is an absolute star of the future.
And Beatrice Faumuina.
That could be enough. 57 metres 12 for
Beatrice Mabuina. That puts her into the silver medal position. She's delighted with that throw. So
I was 19 and just everything was new, and I remember just every day was something was exciting. I'm meeting the team, getting to know other fellow teammates, different sports, people that you've read about. I remember going, I've only read and seen things off the TV about these people, now we're in the same team.
Both Alma and Faumuina won gold 4 years later when the Commonwealth Games were hosted in Asia for the first time.
Kuala Lumpur, 98 Sukan Commonwealth.
Kuala Lumpur and the changing face of these games. Over 5,000 athletes and officials, 15 sports. And for New Zealand, the 3 gold medal star, a kid from Te Atatu and West Auckland.
And for the third time this evening, Darren Liddell collects a gold gong for his efforts in this 105+ kilogram division. He shows them off with the pride that he so rightly feels.
It's not every day that one of those comes along, and it was quite an emotional roller coaster ride. To be suddenly thrust into the limelight, and you have everyone from your local school to the media wanting interviews and stuff like that. It was certainly a life-changing experience.
But the honour of the entire evening belongs to this man here.
I was lucky to have my father there. He'd been ill prior to the Commonwealth Games, and we weren't sure if he was going to make it. And I was just really lucky he managed to get there. And the support was excellent. I know I'd won 3 gold medals, but I wasn't expecting a fanfare. And then all of a sudden, I get home, like, friends, loved ones were there for me, and also the media. And then to find out there was a ticker tape parade when I got back to Te Atatu, it was like, oh my goodness, I've been thrown in the limelight here, haven't I?
3 of these little buggers.
Kuala Lumpur also brought the introduction of team sports like netball and rugby sevens.
it's gold for New Zealand.
The first day arriving at the Games Village, we're like little kids at Disneyland, We're just sort of staring around and all these different nations, and by the end of the week you could tell which athletes were which sports just by body shape and all that sort of thing, and you're always sitting there wondering, gee, wonder what those people do and all this. So many different languages, so it was hugely different for us, but amazing experience.
Not only was the questioned inclusion of team sports helping revive the Commonwealth Games culture, it was also providing a valuable insight for these guys.
We've won a lot of titles with the Sevens team over the years, but the Commonwealth Games sits right up the top, I believe.
Well, it's a marvellous moment for any sportsman or woman to step onto a rostrum and to receive a gold medal, be it Olympic or Commonwealth.
The New Zealand Sevens team was to win again in Manchester.
There's not many people in New Zealand that have had the opportunity to have 2 gold medals. I actually only got 1. I gave 1 to Gordon Titchens, which is the only sad part for me about the Commonwealth Games. They actually don't give the coaches anything.
Our netballer's story, though, not so golden 4 years on.
But it's the steely Australians who have taken gold again in extra time here. Disappointment for New Zealand.
Manchester 2002, and the shape of the Commonwealth Games had changed. Yes, netball. Yes, rugby sevens. In fact, 17 sports and 72 nations. The biggest multi-sport event held in Great Britain since the 1948 Olympics.
Well, I think the Commonwealth Games are on a roll. There's so many ways I see that the Commonwealth Games are growing as an entity.
For New Zealand and Manchester, it was once again the Golden Girls who shone. Sarah Ulmer wins her 2nd Commonwealth title.
That is unbelievable. She's got the gold medal.
And so does Beatrice Faumuina.
It's as good as gold. She's defended her discus title, Beatrice, and the tears coming into her eyes already. Yes, I think so.
I remember just sort of standing there going, I've done it. And so what I did was I changed my gear and I raced over, said congratulations to Deb. And then, of course, the next person I went to was go and find Mum. Now, I didn't realise I was kind of causing a few problems there because I broke security by jumping over the barrier, finding Mum on the 2nd level. I was thinking, this has got to be normal for people. And next thing I know, I had this major security alert. I had all these people following me. And I said to them, and the people there were neat because they knew what was happening because I just won the gold and that was it. I was just going to run rampant.
Meantime, in one of the game's traditional sports, strongman Nigel Avery won double gold and silver, his 3rd, 4th and 5th Commonwealth medals.
And for the first time at these Commonwealth Games weightlifting championships, we hear the anthem of New Zealand.
At the Games' inception back in 1930, organisers decreed the Games should be merrier and less stern than the Olympics, that they should be a celebration of sport. For over 3/4 of a century, they have been.
We've been in every Com Games since 1930. We're deemed one of the big players and one of the significant ones. So for us it's important, and for the Commonwealth, our connection with it is important, and it's an enduring partnership.
It's also an enduring aim for any New Zealand athlete.
When you get into the All Blacks, they welcome you and they say, well, you know, the easy part's over now. Now you've got to play, because everybody who wore the jersey before you is watching, and so is every kid who wants to wear it after you. And, you know, that's part of the All Black ethos, but I believe it's part of the Commonwealth Games ethos as well.
Every championship, all the nations that are represented, you see the flags right around the whole stadium. And I think it's just something beyond measurable to see your own flag fly.
And we, as children, look up to all the Commonwealth heroes and, you know, people before us and people after us, and it's a wonderful, wonderful feel-good.
1974 Commonwealth Games, when I was a young fella at school, and I sat at my school desk with a little transistor radio with one of those wee earpieces, and I put it up my sleeve and I would listen to the radio broadcast as much as I could. And, you know, I think probably just those games themselves were as big an inspiration as I've had out of anything else.
You go to a school and you know, I mean, I pass all my medals around, and you see them put them on and jump up and down, and I'm a winner, I'm a gold medalist, and you know, somewhere along the line, I really hope that somewhere down the track someone says, hey, I once had these on when I was 7, and now I've just won my own.
The very first time I put the black singlet on with a silver fern on it, it was a Jockey brand, and it just had a patch sewn onto the lapel, and I still have it, and it is something really special.
The silver fern and running for your country, you know, there's a pride there that, you know, I can see why other people who represent New Zealand are proud of it too, and you always want to dig deep, and deeper than you've ever dug before, because the country, you're representing your country and you want to do it proudly.
We've got to join together.